So, as you are all aware, the new government in the UK, that is the Labour government, has come in. It has been there for the past few weeks, and there have been some really big changes that have come as a result of this government. Now, obviously, as you know, that whenever any government comes into action in any country, there are going to be several massive expectations from the local people and from people all over the world in terms of economy, immigration, but also the general sustenance. And the Labour government hasn't really inherited UK in a good way, because obviously there are ongoing costs of living crisis, but also recession and NHS strikes. And in today's video, I will be detailing what are some of the changes the Labour government has planned for student visas, work visas, and all of the people who are planning to come into the UK. So if you are somebody who's planning to come to the UK either on study or work reasons, or as somebody who is a dependent, then this video is for you, because in today's video we will be discussing all details related to changes in policy and what you can be expecting in the next few months. So firstly, let's talk about the student visa. Now, as a part of the conservative strategy, so the government that was before the Labour government, which was under Rishi Sunak, obviously they felt that students led to a lot of increased migration in the UK, and to bring those numbers down, they suggested that students who were coming for bachelor's and master's degree would not be allowed to get their dependents, that is your wife or your husband and your children along with you. Now, the only exception to this rule was that if you are coming to study a master's in research program, would you be allowed to get your dependents along with you? Now, in terms of this, obviously there has been no massive change. The Labour government is sticking to the plan to reduce the total number of students and their dependents so as to reduce the net migration. So again, no clear updates have been put out about it, but hopefully they are sticking to the plan, and so this rule is going to stay. The second visa category that I want to talk about is the PSW. Now, for those of y'all who do not know what it is, the PSW stands for Post-Study Work Visa. Now, as a part of this visa category, students, whether they completed their masters or their bachelors, were allowed to stay for up to 2 years in the UK and find employment. So once you complete your term on your student visa, you were allowed to transition to the PSW and search for employability. Now, because you were on the PSW visa, you would not need a work or a job that was sponsored by any company within the UK. Now, this obviously worked in the favor of students because A, students might have not had a lot of experience in the fields that they completed their masters or bachelors in, and this gave them the opportunity to build those skills, learn those skills, and land roles with sponsorships in the future. However, there was a lot of conversation about reducing the PSW from 2 years to 6 months. This created a lot of anxiety among students, and that has now been resolved because the Labour government has said that they are not going to do any massive changes to this at the minute, but they are going to monitor the situation to see how this progresses in the future. So obviously, students who are planning to come in September 24 intake and Jan 25 intake, you do not need to be stressed or anxious. The current rules will still apply to you, and you will be offered a PSW of up to 2 years. Third category that I obviously want to speak about is the work visa. Now, as a part of the skilled worker visa route, the government, that is the conservative government of Rishi Sunak, had made several changes, one of which was obviously increasing the minimum salary threshold. So that used to be around £28,000 earlier, but it has now gone up to nearly £38,700, which is a big jump and actually a bit questionable because the average salary in the UK is 33,000. So what this would do is actually deter people from making that sort of move to the UK, because they wouldn't be able to land these jobs in the UK, because landing such jobs would actually be impossible. Now again, if you are a healthcare professional, this rule would not apply for you, and I've left the reason for that in this video, so don't forget to check that out to get a lot of more clarity on what is the minimum salary that applies to you for a health and care worker visa if you are coming as a healthcare professional, that is a doctor, a nurse, a allied health professional, that is physio, OT, lab technicians, ODPs, etc. But if you are coming under the general route, then salary thresholds that you now need to meet are obviously 38,700. Some positive news around this is that the Labour government is actually looking into reviewing these thresholds. Now again, this could be a positive news, because what might happen is that they might realize that obviously these thresholds are really high, and so they're obviously going to try and drive these thresholds a bit more lower. But it could also go the other way, where obviously they feel that they want to increase the thresholds, even though that might seem a really unreasonable move at this stage. So like I said, this is a sort of 50-50 situation, but for me it honestly looks like a bit more positive, and that's why I would keep my mind filled with positive thoughts for all you guys. The worst news about the skilled worker visa and the health and care worker visa generally that I want to share in this video though is the fact that the Labour government has said that it is going to introduce skill improvement plans. Now what are skill improvement plans? Well, the short form of it is that it's going to train the people in the UK to start performing roles where there are existing shortages in the UK. Now I'm going to be honest, this was in conversation over the last few years, and the Labour government and the Conservative governments have been thinking about this for a long time. But again, if I am going to be completely honest with you, I feel that obviously building up a skill is going to take a lot of time in terms of education, qualification, and experience. And this is where I think you, as somebody who's planning to migrate to the UK, can take this opportunity and actually come to the UK. Because also, like I've said before, even though they are looking for physios, they are looking for OTs, they are trying to give people over here an opportunity to study those degrees, they are not finding enough candidates or enough students enrolled into these programs. And again, even if students are enrolled at this stage, they are not going to become physios or OTs for the next 2 to 3 years at the very least. So you are in a position right now to start applying for those roles, getting your HCPC registration, clearing those interviews. And if you have any questions about them, do not forget to leave them down in the comments below, but also drop me a DM on Instagram. My handle is physiotherapy in UK, and I will promise to try and get back to you. But like I said, the skills improvement plan is a bad news, but it is a silver lining for people who are in the right time and are going to grab this opportunity to come to the UK. Next update is a bit of an update about the carers visa. So now the carers visa, like I said, does not apply to doctors, nurses, physios, OTs, ODPs, biomedical scientists, radiographers, etc. This only applies to carers. Now let me remind you that in order to be a carer in the UK, you do not need a qualified degree. And so a lot of people who were coming to the UK were really exploiting this pathway. They had seen a nearly 76% rise in the number of carers coming to the UK. And the worst part was that I know of people who have contacted me on Instagram who've come from India and from Nigeria in the UK on this particular visa, and now they were not landing enough hours in carer shifts. That just meant that they were not having enough salary to support themselves and their families, and so the UK government has taken a decision to obviously reduce the number of people coming on this visa. So one of the things that they've done is reduce the number of dependents. So there are no dependents allowed on the carer visa, which I think has been a bit of a positive impact, because now the number of carers coming to the UK have reduced. This rule has obviously been looked and is not going to change anytime in the near future. So if you are planning to come under this route, do remember that you will not be allowed to get any family members along with you, whether it is your spouse or your child. And finally, I want to talk to you briefly about some of the immigration updates. So obviously, as you were aware, in the last sort of 6 months or so, the IHS fees, which is the immigration health surcharge, has gone up. So the immigration health surcharge allows you to access the NHS while you are in the UK. You need to pay this fee along with your student visa, PSW visa, work visa, or any other application. However, in the last few months, they have seen a sudden boom or a sudden increase in the IHS fees, and nowadays it is nearly about £1,000 for just about a year. So if you are issuing your work visa for 3 years, that's going to be 1,000 into 3, which is not an easy amount to bear, because that would nearly come up to 3 lakh rupees. Now again, I just want to make you aware about this, because an easier route out of this, if you are a healthcare professional, is obviously applying for the health and care worker visa. So if you are somebody who is within the healthcare profession and has been offered a role in the UK, I would advise you to go back to your company and make sure that they write that your occupation falls under the health and care worker visa category, especially if it falls. So do make sure you've checked that before. But if you've made sure that it does check out under the health and care worker visa category, you can obviously go back to your company and make sure that that is written on your course letter, which is your certificate of sponsorship. And once that is mentioned there, you will obviously be exempt from paying the IHS fees, because that is the current regulations right now. Anybody who's applying under the health and care worker visa scheme does not need to pay for the IHS. So do make sure that that stays in your mind. But that's it from today's video, guys. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Take care.